Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these. All right, today we're going to talk about the Goths. They are fascinating. I don't think we really understand their influence in Europe. History tells us that the Goths were Germanic people who showed up in the early centuries of the Common Era, impacting some great empires of their time. But their origins, their migrations, their impacts go far beyond what is commonly taught. Some historians trace them to Scandinavia, but it's a big maybe. There's a question mark there. Others point to an earlier presence in Eastern Europe, particularly around the Black Sea region. Remember Black Sea region. I'm going to bring it up many times. They may be descended from or were influenced by the Getae and the Dacians, who are Thracian warrior people. Okay. So these earlier Gothic tribes would have interacted with steppe nomads, Iranian-speaking Scythians, and even Near Eastern civilizations. So I'm going to explain to you all about the Goths, their movement, and how they are affecting us today. Interesting, huh? But first, I'm going to say hello to some people. Adric was in here early this morning saying it's on. Nina is here saying that she can't wait. My favorite auntie. Adric says, let's hear it for the dancing Maggies. Rael is here. Hello to you as well. And peace. Snowman is here, ready for class. Thank you for coming. And Spain Man is here. Greetings to you as well. And anybody watching from the clouds, hello to you as well. Please feel free to say hello in the chat. And to the replay gang, happy to have you here. Hope you enjoy it. You can also say hello in the chat. I will say hello back. And remember, this is the best live tribe on YouTube. So if you want to join the live tribe and watch things live, that's great. For those of you who live in areas where there is a time change, this may be a bit of a different time for you. So let's get into, oh, Adrian is here. He says, let's go. This one's going to be long because these people underpin a lot. And if you noticed that I did a show called Who Are the Shasu? I've got this one, Who Are the Goths? The next one coming up that is already scheduled is Who Are the Bretonics? And then we will have Who Are the Natufians? And then we will have Who Are the Khazarians? So all of these connect together. And so then there will be some information come out about why we're here. So this will all make sense. But I think this one is very timely because there's a lot going on in the world today that is affected by these folks. So have my notes. I'll kind of, and you got notes everywhere. Okay. So if you see me looking down, that's what it is. So as the Goths, they just sort of showed up. Nobody really knows from where. As they moved into the Caucasus region. So this is where they went. They showed up and they just went over the Caucasus Mountains. They just showed up in the Caucasus region. They encountered various other tribes because this area, right around this area, and during the turn of the millennia, that area was huge for trade globally. It was a crossroads region. Okay. So they encountered a lot of other tribe, including the Sarmatians, the Alains, eventually the Huns. And over time, these Gothic groups became key players in the conflict between the Roman Empire and some other barbarian groups. So Adrian says, I'm all for the smoke. There will be. Hi, Leon. Thank you for being here. So they showed up right around the start of the Common Era, maybe closer to the 1st century, but by the 4th and early 5th century, so this is hundreds of years, okay, under leaders like Alaric I, who was over the Visigoths, and Theodoric the Great, who was over the Ostrogoths, the Goths established these really powerful kingdoms in parts of Europe, Germany, Italy, Spain, and Gaul, which is France. Okay, so Germany, Italy, Spain, France. All right. Leon says he's listening on time and a half. Okay, catch up fast. All right, so the migration of the Goths through the Caucasus region is part of the broader Germanic migrations and barbarian invasions that reshaped Europe during the late Roman Empire, or during the time we call the Roman Empire. So other Germanic groups like the Vandals, the Franks, the Burgundians migrated across Europe, but they didn't directly pass through the Caucasus Mountain region. So the Goths' passage through the Caucasus was a key chapter in their migration, and it played a role in their subsequent involvement in the alleged collapse of the Western Roman Empire. The Goths, particularly the Ostrogoths, migrated over the Caucasus Mountains as part of their movement southward and eastward from the start of the Common Era through the 3rd and 4th centuries. So this migration played an important part in their settlement in the Roman Empire's territory, where they would establish kingdoms in regions like Italy and Spain. Okay, those were the two first biggies. This movement of the Goths is a crucial part of their broader Germanic migration that contributed to the reshaping of the Roman Empire. Notice I will not say the fall of the Roman Empire, and you will find out why. Adrian says, put some speck on Maggie's name and hit the like. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. Please do that. Okay, so remember the places that we talked about where they built empires. So Italy, which is Rome, right? Rome, Italy, same thing. Italy, Spain, France, Germany, France, Gaul, same thing, right? So today we're going to talk about Spain, France, and Roman Italy. When I do the Britannic show next weekend, we will hit on the Germany part, okay? But you all know we know a lot of history about Germany, right? So that'll be in the Britannic show, and it is about the Goths. So I guess you could call the Britannics part 2 of the Goths. So let's talk about Spain, okay? So we'll talk about Spain. We're going to talk about just some history of Spain since the Goths built an empire there. Okay, so we know about Christopher Columbus, right? 1492, Columbus, under the patronage of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain, famously sailed westward to find a new route to Asia, and instead discovered some islands in the Americas. So that marked the beginning of Spanish exploration and colonization of the Western Hemisphere. 1519 to 1521, one of the most famous figures in Spanish invasion, Cortez, we've heard of Cortez, led the expedition that resulted in the fall of the Aztec Empire in present-day Mexico. Thanks, Cortez. How much did we lose by losing that empire? They used a lot of weapons, alliances with indigenous groups, and exploiting the effects of European disease on the native population. Now, one of the things, a little caveat here when I talk about alliances with indigenous groups, um, that another name for that is psychological warfare. So I don't ever put blame on indigenous groups who created alliances with invaders. Because if you look at, oh, who was that guy? Adrian knows. Who was the Belgian guy who went into the Congo? That if you look into that, what would happen when they would go to invade and colonize? They would send people ahead using psychological warfare to try to gain alliances in the region. So those are war tactics, and so we don't put blame on any indigenous peoples who created these initial alliances with invaders. Leopold, look at yeah, Leopold. Thank you. Thank you. But when you look into that, there's a lot of documentation about that, how they would send people ahead to start the psychological warfare. So, between Leopold, or when people talk about, well, Black people sold Black people into slavery. Okay, well, we also know about the psychological warfare that happened. So why are we going to put more blame on people who sell people, although that ain't great, right? Than we do on actual enslavers and the people who ran the transatlantic slave trade. That's weird. That's just weird to me. So that's my little caveat. Adrian says, I'm sure the alliances happened because of those initial missionaries. And you know what? If we want to say initial missionaries also were using psychological warfare, I'm okay with that. Yeah, Adrian says, trade you some Jesus for some of that land. Yeah. Okay. So we got Cortez, that he used weapons, alliances with indigenous groups, exploited European diseases, and wiped out the Aztecs. Okay. And when I say wiped out, they always say wiped out, and then you'll always find people who descended from these people. So we'll say wiped out, meaning that the empire, not necessarily all the people. Then Francisco Pizarro and the Incas. So Pizarro led the conquest of the Inca Empire in South America. Like Cortez, he took advantage of internal conflicts, superior technology, and disease to wipe out the Incan Empire. Then we have the colonization of the Caribbean and Central America. So following these major conquests, Spain established colonies in the Caribbean and large parts of Central and South America. This included the establishment of the Viceroyalty of New Spain and the Viceroyalty of Peru. Now I want to talk about this Gothic Empire in Spain. Prior to the Goths taking over, the Moors had Spain. Spain, that area, was the Moor Empire. And the Goths worked with some other folks, Catholics, the Romans, to wipe out the Moors. But we'll talk about that. Okay, so the Spanish Empire expanded throughout the Americas, creating a vast network of colonies that spanned from present-day Canada all the way to Argentina. The invasion led to the Columbian Exchange, which is a massive stealing of plants, animals, and diseases between the Old and New Worlds. The consequences included the spread of European disease, which devastated indigenous populations, and the enforcement of European culture and Roman Catholicism in the Americas. There go the dogs. Oh, look at that. I have super chat. Isn't that awesome? I still just get so tickled. Okay, so Adrian says, because the story of selling comes from the stories told by the conquerors, it's his story. How are we to even know that's what happened? My son and I were talking about getting our history from the ops today. Yes, I totally agree. That's why it's like we have to look at a lot of hidden history and put things together. I do that a lot. I also say to people a lot of time on lives that you have to look not at race. Race is what they tell us. Bloodlines are how they operate. So that's why we're going to lift up the veil on some of this stuff. For sure, for sure. Yeah, Raul totally agrees. Okay, so what do we got? Okay, so it devastated the indigenous populations and the enforcement of European culture and Roman Catholicism in the Americas. Spain extracted vast wealth from the Americas, especially through the mining of gold and silver. This contributed to Spain's dominance in the European affairs for several centuries, but also fueled inequality and exploitation in the colonies. Leon said the Spanish got attacked by a tribe and won. That tribe had issues with the Aztecs. That tribe or clan gave the Spanish all their soldiers. Meh. So let's go to the Spanish Inquisition, which went on from 1478 all the way up to 1834. The Spanish Inquisition was a religious tribunal established by Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile. Again, it started in 1478. It was primarily aimed at maintaining Catholic orthodoxy. Orthodoxy means rules. So if you hear orthodox, it means like the basic rules. So maintaining Catholic orthodoxy in Spain following the Reconquista, right? Which is the Roman Catholic reconquest. Because they were saying before the Moors were in control, it was Christian. It was Roman. Okay. So even they put Roman and Catholic and religion as the same thing. It's the Romans. Okay. So the goal, that's like the main goal of the Inquisition was to identify and punish heretics. This is what they called people who wouldn't follow the Roman Catholic rules. So particularly those suspected of secretly practicing Judaism, mysticism, or Islam after the Reconquista. So after they took over or they conquered the Moors, you got big problems if you are still practicing something else. So under the Moors, the Jews were allowed to do what they wanted to do. Any type of the mystic religions were allowed to do what they wanted to do. If you were Islam, that's who the Moors were. But when the Romans took back over, you had big problems unless you were practicing their orthodoxy. So Spain expelled Jews in 1492 under the Alhambra decree. And the Muslim Moors were forcibly converted or expelled over those following decades. So let me stop for a second. A lot of the architecture and things that you will see in Spain were the Moors architecture. So the Inquisition was used to root out conversos, which are Jews and Muslim who outwardly, through that forced conversion, outwardly converted to Christianity, but they were suspected of practicing their old religions in secret. Leon says Leopold utilized African tree sap for soldiers not to get Zika virus. Huh, that's interesting. I wonder if it keeps, if it's like a mosquito repellent. Maybe we need to think about that. I need to know which tree. I'm allergic to bug bites, so I need to know what tree. So in the Inquisition, they employed methods like torture, forced confessions, and burnings at the stake to extract confessions from suspected heretics. And y'all know, if you're tortured, you're going to say whatever they want to say. So public executions known as auto de fe, which is an act of faith, were a common practice where the convicted were burned at the stake in public ceremonies. You know, to kind of make an example, the first Grand Inquisitor, Torquemada, was one of the most notorious figures in the Spanish Inquisition. He alone was responsible for the death of thousands of people accused of heresy, just believing different than the Roman rules. Adrian says Maggie equals allergic to everything. Stop it. Stop it. Maybe, but stop it. Okay. So while the Inquisition was under the control of the Pope, who was the head of the Roman Catholicism or Roman Empire, it was very closely linked to the Spanish monarchy and was used to strengthen their political power. Okay. So the Spanish Inquisition is prototypical religious intolerance leading to torture, execution, and expulsion of the Jews, the Moors, and anyone practicing mysticism. Okay. So the Inquisition helped to solidify the Catholic rules, the Catholic orthodoxy, but it also stifled intellectual and cultural progress that had been in that region under the Moors. Many scholars and intellectuals fled Spain, including notable figures such as Miguel de Cervantes and Luis de Leon, leading to a decline in Spain's intellectual and artistic achievements. This is why we don't let people take credit for the architecture. That was the Moors. So the Spanish Inquisition was officially stopped in 1834, which was 190 years ago. Okay, it was not that long ago. And it went on for hundreds of years. If you did not follow the Roman rules, you were out. Okay, and that it ended under the reign of Isabella II. Okay. So Spain's history with slavery is deeply tied to its colonial empire in the Americas and the transatlantic slave trade. Slavery existed in Spain long before its colonies were established in the old style of slavery. Okay. Slavery, two different things. How'd I get balloons? Oh, you guys maybe don't see that. The transatlantic slave trade led to chattel slavery, which is, oh, you do see the balloons, which is very different than historical slavery, which is also different than indentured servitude. All this conflation of it all being the same thing is wrong and not allowed over here. So slavery existed in Spain long before its colonies were established, but the system of slavery grew exponentially with the establishment of this Spanish Empire. So when the Spanish began colonizing the Americas, they initially relied on the encomienda system, which allowed Spanish settlers to extract forced labor from the indigenous people. That is the old style of slavery, forced labor. Okay. However, the drastic decline in the indigenous populations due to, I don't know, disease, working them to death, and violence of wiping out people led the Spanish to increasingly rely on enslaved Africans. So from the 16th to the 19th centuries, 300 years, Spain was one of the major players in the transatlantic slave trade. They forcibly transported Africans to work in sugar, tobacco, and coffee plantations in the Caribbean, Central and South America. And Spain's Caribbean colonies were particularly reliant on African enslaved people. The Catholic Church, again, the Romans, played a complex role in slavery. On one hand, it justified the enslavement of non-Christians, but on the other, some religious figures like Bartolome de las Casas advocated for the rights of the indigenous people and fought against the worst abuses of the encomienda system. So not the Africans, but the indigenous. Over time, the Roman stance on slavery changed, but it was still very complicit in maintaining enslavement of Africans throughout much of the Spanish Empire. Hi, Prince Muko. Thanks for being here. Adrian says, Doctrine of Discovery in 1493. Yes. I found it, so it's mine. So slavery was officially abolished in the Spanish colonies in the late 19th century. After the United States, by the way. In Spain, slavery was abolished in 1886 in Cuba. So that's only 139 years ago. Think about that. That's just great grandma. That's great grandma's time. For me. For someone younger than me, that's great grandma, but that's just great grandma's time. That is not that long ago. It's just great grandma. Okay. So slavery was abolished in 1886 in Cuba, which was its last remaining colony that still had legalized slavery. So they held on for a long time. However, the transition to a free labor system was complex, difficult, and the legacy of slavery continued to shape social and economic structures in the Spanish-speaking world. So now we understand Spain. Let's talk about France a little bit, okay? So France, Gaul, the Goths created Gaul. France began its colonial ventures in the late 1500s, driven by the desire for wealth, resources, and the spread of, what's that again? Roman Orthodoxy, Roman rules. The French established colonies in New France, which is modern-day Canada. And why do they always call it New something? We'll talk about that with the Britannics too. So they established colonies in New France and parts of the U.S., Louisiana, okay? They were mainly focused on the fur trade, fur comes up again, and missionary work, right, with indigenous people. France also colonized islands in the Caribbean, such as Saint Domingue, which is now Haiti, Martinique, and Guadeloupe, where sugar and coffee plantations were established. These colonies were heavily dependent on enslaved African people. Okay, let me read. Let's see, Leon says, Maggie, this is what I found. Indigenous African communities have traditionally used tree sap and plant-based remedies for insect repellents. For example, sap from trees like neem, copaiba, or gum. Oh, I've heard of that one. Acacia has been known for its insect repelling properties. I love that. I'm going to look it up. Thank you, Leon. Appreciate that. So by the late 18th century, France had a more established colonial empire that extended across several continents, particularly in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Okay. In India, France held territories in India called Pondicherry and part of its rivalry with Britain for control of the subcontinent. France expanded into much of West Africa and North Africa during the 19th century. France established a colonial presence in Indochina, which is the Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia area, which became a significant part of the empire by the late 19th century. France continued its dominance in the Caribbean, with Saint Domingue becoming the wealthiest colony in the world due to its sugar production, though it was based on enslaved labor. So the French Revolution inspired some of, and this is 1789, inspired some of France's colonies to seek independence. In places like Haiti, this resulted in a revolution led by formerly enslaved people, culminating in the Haitian Revolution, which went on from 1791 to 1804, which saw the creation of the first independent Black republic. Haiti is often considered one of the earliest examples of a successful slave result, although the formerly enslaved had to pay reparations to their captors. Phew. Leon says India, aka 500 million people starving to their end. Yeah. So by the late 19th century, the French Empire became the second largest colonial empire in the world right after the British Empire. The so-called Scramble for Africa, that's what it was called. As if there weren't, okay. The so-called Scramble for Africa during the 1880s and 1890s saw France aggressively expand its holdings in Africa. The French also solidified their control over much of Indochina. So France expanded its empire through Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, as well as vast portions of sub-Saharan Africa. France ruled over Senegal, the Ivory Coast, Mali, Niger, Chad, Mauritania, and a handful of others. France consolidated control over Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia into one French Indochina colony in the 1880s, using the region's resources to fuel industrial growth. Adrian says that Haiti paid reparations until World War II. Isn't that terrible? Why is it that enslavers are the ones who have received reparations? I mean, that's a rhetorical question. So France's colonial expansion was marked by the use of brutal tactics to maintain control over its colonies. That included forced labor, slavery, chattel slavery, violent suppression of uprisings. Okay. Just some notable ones is the French conquest of Algeria is perhaps the most notorious episode of French colonial violence. Over the course of nearly 2 decades, the French military conducted brutal campaigns to suppress resistance from indigenous Algerians. Terror tactics included the destruction of villages, mass executions, and the use of chemical warfare. Around 1 million Algerians were estimated to have died during this period. The forced settlement of civilians, the Pied Noir, if y'all know what that means, in Algeria, and then the widespread appropriation of land for French settlers led to long-lasting tensions that contributed to the Algerian War of Independence that went on from 1954 to 1962. Look how close we are to modern times, okay? I mean, where Niger is concerned, we're in modern times now, right, with France. So France's efforts to reassert control over its former Indochinese colonies led to the First Indochina War. The war saw brutal French repression, including the mass execution of civilians, torture, and deportations. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954 marked a turning point when the French were decisively defeated by the Viet Minh, leading to the eventual independence of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, until America got involved a little bit later. So in many of France's African colonies, particularly in West Africa, the French extracted vast amounts of natural resources using enslavement. In the Congo, which was then under Belgian control, so that's the King Leopold, enslavement was also used to extract rubber, which involved immense cruelty and exploitation. Although France itself was less notorious for this than Belgium, I mean, how can you top the cruelty and inhumanity of that evil monster? I don't know. Similar systems were enforced across the territories. So in 1947, the people of Madagascar attempted to revolt against French rule. They were met with extreme brutality. The French military killed between 11,000 to 100,000 Malagasy people, including mass executions, torture, and burning villages. Leon says Bill Clinton is that season of interference with the country of Haiti is very interesting. Woo! I'll have to check that out. So after World War II, anti-colonial movements gained a little bit of momentum worldwide, and France faced significant resistance to its colonial rule. The aftermath of World War II, combined with mounting resistance movements, led to the decolonization of some of the French territories. Okay. So after the French defeat in Vietnam, France granted Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia independence again until America wanted to get involved, the United States particularly. After years of violent conflict, Algeria gained independence from France, ending 130 years of colonial rule. The war was particularly brutal, with widespread atrocities committed, including the use of torture and mass killing. Throughout the 1960s, many African nations that had been colonized by France gained some independence, including Senegal, Ivory Coast, Mali, Niger, that's arguable, Chad, and some others. So despite decolonization, France still retains several overseas territories scattered around the world. These include Guadeloupe, Martinique, French Guiana, and Reunion Island in the Caribbean, South America, and the Indian Ocean, New Caledonia, and French Polynesia in the Pacific. These territories are considered part of France and are represented in the French government. However, many people in these territories have issues with being colonized. They want political autonomy, and there are many independence movements. The legacy of French colonialism is still present in its former colonies. Issues like poverty, economic dependence, ethnic tensions, and the struggle for identity persist in many former French colonies, particularly in North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. Algeria, for example, still experiences political and social challenges related to the colonial past, including the ongoing debate over recognizing the colonial atrocities. Just saying it happened. That's being debated. In many former colonies, French language and culture remain influential. Countries like Senegal, Ivory Coast, and Madagascar maintain strong cultural and economic ties to France, unfortunately, even as they navigate the complexities of their post-colonial identities. Oh, they're talking about some of the atrocities. So I alluded to the fact that the Goths created those two particular empires, right? Roman Empire, which is Roman Catholicism. That's Italy. They had empires in Italy, where Rome is. Spanish Empire, and Gaul, which is France. So let's talk about them a little bit more. Let me make more of a case. So talk about some key points, okay? So the Goths are thought to have originally inhabited areas around Scandinavia. We talked about that, maybe, or the southern part of the Baltic region. The earliest mentions of the Goths refer to them as living in these northern regions, though they're believed to have migrated there over time from somewhere else. We cannot find where they came from. The earliest clear reference to the Goths comes from the work of the Romans, but they likely were present in the region for several centuries before this. So the Roman historian Tacitus, in his book Germania, written around the year 98, refers to the Gothons or Gatones. It's Roman. I always get a Spanish accent when I try to speak Latin. So he talked about them during that time. The Goths had a tribal society. It was typically organized around kinship groups and warrior elites. They were often led by chiefs or kings who were chosen based on their military prowess, and there was some noble birth in there. So the Goths had a warrior centric culture that placed a high value on individual bravery, honor, and loyalty to the tribe. Their social structure revolved around fighting men who were highly regarded in society, and women and children played supporting roles in the home and the economy. So there's evidence that the Goths began migrating from Scandinavia to the southern regions of Eastern Europe around the Vistula River in present day Poland by the 2nd century BCE, or somewhere else. Again, they cannot decide. But they settled near the Black Sea. So keep the Black Sea in mind. By the earliest 1st century, the Goths had been settling along the northern shores of the Black Sea in what is now modern day Ukraine and southern Russia. Archaeological findings suggest that they had established small kingdoms and chiefdoms in this area. So this is their original homeland, home base, okay? The shores of the Black Sea in modern day Ukraine and southern Russia, okay? So the Goths' material culture was very different from their supposed Scandinavian roots. This is why this is a problem, okay? Archaeological findings include evidence of metalwork, wooden structures, and burial practices that highlight their very distinct cultural identity. It's not attached anywhere else. That's why they just sort of show up. So, the Goths were not yet expanding when they first came into contact with the Roman Empire. They were settling in that region, but they started having interactions. Okay, so the Goths traded goods like furs. Oh, we were talking about furs, weren't we, earlier? Didn't I mention that? Amber and enslaved people with the Roman Empire. And there's evidence of diplomatic contacts between the two. In some instances, the Goths were enlisted as mercenaries in the Roman Empire. Now, remember when I talked about the Shasu being hired mercenaries and how they had been pushed out of Canaanite into the Caucasus regions? But then the Shasu disappeared? And then the Goths show up. I don't know. I don't know if it's connected. That's weird. So over time, the Goths and Romans shared culture and military technology. This was especially true after they moved into and settled in that Black Sea region, where they were there. They were in direct proximity to the Roman provinces like Dacia. Oh wait, didn't I say Dacians earlier? The Thracians, and Thrace. So Dacia is Romania, by the way, the Romani people, and Thrace is modern day Bulgaria. So one of the key events leading to the Gothic expansion and the merging of the Western Roman Empire was the arrival of the Huns in the 4th century. Leave it to the Huns, man. Attila's got to come in and create a ruckus, okay? So in the 370-ish of the Common Era, the Goths were pushed by the Huns, right? This nomadic warrior group from the east in more farther into the Roman territories. So the Huns' military pressure forced many Gothic tribes to migrate west, leading to the famous Gothic Wars. Because, the Romans were like, what are y'all doing here? So the Battle of Adrianople in 378 CE is one of the most significant Gothic military engagements with Rome. The Battle of Adrianople was where the Visigoths, led by their king Fritigern, decisively defeated the Roman army in that battle. That battle was a major turning point in the relationship between the Goths and the Romans. Leon says they assimilated with each other more likely, in my opinion. They had a little too much in common. Adrian says, I'm famous. Yes, the Battle of Adrianople. And it is spelled the same, by the way, if you guys want to look it up. Oh, yeah. You're going to start saying, I am Sparta. So before their larger expansion, some Goths had established small kingdoms near the Black Sea. Again, we talked about that, including the Grutungi, which are the Eastern Goths, and the Turvingi, which are the Western Goths. These kingdoms would later play a crucial role in the Gothic migrations and the eventual formation of these larger Gothic states. Again, this is their homeland. This is their original establishment right by the Black Sea, okay, which I told you is modern day Ukraine and part of southern Russia. So let's talk about that region, okay? So the Goths' interactions with what's present-day Russia involved their migration and settlement around the Black Sea region, which later became part of the territory that's known as Ukraine and part of southern Russia. This region played a key role in the Goths' expansion and their interactions with other cultures, including the Romans. I gotta get a drink. I've been talking so much. This goes on for a while, but I just want to make sure. Yep, I didn't miss anything. I got piles of papers everywhere, guys. So the Goth settlement near the Black Sea placed them in proximity to both Rome and other nomadic tribes that were active across this Eurasian steppe. Remember, I told you this was a crossroads area. This area was crucial in facilitating their interactions with these groups, okay? So the Goths settled in the Crimean Peninsula. Remember Crimea, remember that. And along the northern shores of the Black Sea, okay? So this Crimea is, the focal point of this homeland, which brought them into contact with various nomadic people from the steppes of Eurasia, including the Sarmatians, the Huns, other Turkic-speaking groups, and other tribes from the Levant. So the Black Sea became a strategic area. Where have I heard that before? Where they would engage in trade, conflict, and alliances. So one of the earliest Gothic settlements in the region was in Crimea, where the Goths established their kingdom in the 3rd century of the Common Era. So the Goths were a significant force in the region and had some complex relations with the Roman Empire in the beginning. They were both enemies and allies at various points. And while they fought against the Romans in battles such as the Battle of Adrianople, shout out to Adrian, they also served as mercenaries in the Roman army. Wait, serving as mercenaries. I've heard that. The Gothic Wars in the 4th and 5th centuries were marked by the Goths' attempt to move westward into Roman territory. The Goths had already begun their expansion into areas that are now part of modern-day Romania, Hungary, and Bulgaria. The Dacians and Thracians. But their southern movement continued after pushing through the Black Sea region. Leon says, I connect that to their gods and the framework or philosophy around their so-called religious beliefs to justify their rule, aka your shit god logic, we can and they must. Yeah, got that. Okay, so as the Goths moved westward from their Black Sea settlements, they entered the Balkans, okay, which were part of the Roman Empire at that time. This led to some conflicts with the Roman military, where the Visigoths defeated that Roman army we talked about in the Battle of Adrianople, leading to an eventual sack of Rome by the Visigoths in 410. The Ostrogoths, another Gothic group, later established a kingdom in Italy, Roman Empire, under Theodoric the Great, after their movement westward through the Balkans and into the Italian peninsula. So it became called Italy instead of Rome, but that's what it is, just like Gaul and France, same thing. All right, so let's talk about in modern times, that Black Sea region, the actual literal specific areas of the motherland of the Goths. So, which we said is Ukraine and parts of southern Russia. So, in modern times, Ukraine is fighting for its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. This is their point of view. It seeks to protect its territory, including regions that have been contested or occupied by Russian-backed forces, such as Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk. So, they're very concerned about Crimea. Okay. Ukraine has been heavily supported by Western countries, including the United States, the European Union, and NATO. These countries have provided Ukraine with military aid, economic assistance, and political backing. The support from Western nations is largely driven by concerns over Russia's aggression and a desire to uphold the principles of international law and territorial integrity. So, Ukraine's goals include maintaining its independence, securing territorial sovereignty, and reclaiming Crimea, annexed by Russia in 2014, and the Donbass region. That's that region, okay? Occupied by Russian-backed separatists since 2014. So Russia, led by President Vladimir Putin, their side of the argument, they were the primary actor behind the invasions of Ukraine. The Russian government claims several justifications for its actions, which include Russia has expressed longstanding fears about NATO's eastward expansion, which it perceives as a direct threat to its influence and security. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, countries like Ukraine have expressed interest in closer ties with NATO and the European Union, which Russia sees as an encroachment on its traditional sphere of influence. I don't know, who are the biggest actors in NATO? I mean, isn't that like Spain, Britain, Italy, the United States? Isn't that mostly what NATO is? I'm just thinking. So Russia has argued that it needs to protect Russian-speaking populations in Ukraine, particularly in the Donbass region, where pro-Russian separatists have been active since 2014. Moscow has claimed that Ukraine's government was oppressing these populations, though that argument is disputed. Russia has also invoked historical ties between Russia and Ukraine, seeing the two nations as part of a broader Russian world, or Ruski Mir. Some Russian leaders, particularly Putin, have argued that Ukraine and Russia share a common history and that Ukraine is an integral part of the Russian sphere, sometimes referring to Ukraine as part of Russia's civilizational space. So the conflict between Ukraine and Russia began in earnest in 2014. So when Russia annexed Crimea, you can touch everything else. You cannot have Crimea in Ukraine. This move was widely condemned by the international community. Why? What? Wait, what was the big deal about Crimea? Why were we worried about it? And it resulted in economic sanctions against Russia. So following Crimea's annexation, did the whole world freak out when the United States annexed Puerto Rico? No. Why did the whole world freak out when Russia annexed Crimea? You can have everything. You cannot have little teeny Crimea. You cannot have it. Okay. So, following Crimea's annexation, pro-Russian separatists in Donetsk and Luhansk regions of eastern Ukraine declared independence, leading to a war between Ukrainian forces and the separatists. Russia provided military support to the separatists, though it denied direct involvement at the time. Leon says, why do most people start from T to Z? Make my greatest attempt to start from A, meaning 1994, when Ukraine gave up their nukes to the USA for our so-called security and provision and protection. Right. Well, my thing is, it actually goes back to the year 1. But I jumped ahead a little bit, okay? So on February 24th, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, escalating the conflict to a broader and more devastating war. The invasion has involved heavy fighting, especially in eastern and southern Ukraine, with Russia attempting to capture major cities, including the capital, Kiev. All right. Why is Russia involved in this war? What is going on? Russia says they view Ukraine as a key part of the geopolitical sphere of influence. Here you go, Leon. Since Ukraine gained independence in 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it has increasingly aligned itself with the Western countries, including seeking membership in NATO and the European Union. The shift away from Russia has been seen as a loss for Russia's regional power. I'm going to check something real quick. Okay. I'm going to talk about something else here in a minute. So, Russia has consistently expressed concern about NATO's expansion, especially with countries like Poland. Wait, isn't that also a Goth settlement? The Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and Ukraine, seeking closer ties with the alliance. Russia sees NATO as a military threat to its borders and seeks to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO, seeing it as a security risk. Adrian says, hell, the U.S. is trying to annex Canada and Greenland. Yeah. Yeah. So why were we worried about little bitty Crimea? And it was annexing. That's okay. So Russia seeks control or influence over important regions of Ukraine, including the Donbass area. That's a serious area, remember? With its large Russian-speaking population, and Crimea. They want the whole Donbass area, and they want Crimea, which has significant military and naval importance due to its location on the Black Sea. Is it really that significant? It's on the Black Sea? I don't know. So Russia initially aimed to quickly defeat Ukraine's military and install a pro-Russian government. However, Ukrainian resistance, backed by the United States, the biggest military power in the world, arguably, okay? This itty bitty, you get the whole United States behind you. So, however, Ukrainian resistance and international support have slowed Russia's advances. Russian objectives have shifted over time, but they generally include, okay? They want Crimea, okay? Ukrainians say you can't have it. That is ours. It is a big deal to us. They want to take control of eastern Ukraine, the Donbass region. Again, the Ukrainians say, nope, that area is important too. Russia has said they want to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. So this is according to the Russians, okay? They want to denazify Ukraine. They want to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO and ensure that it remains within Russia's sphere of influence. As far as Ukraine is concerned, it's fighting to preserve its sovereignty, to reclaim Crimea and the Donbass, and maintain its independence from Russia and prevent further Russian encroachment. Ukraine has received significant support from Western countries in the form of military aid, economic sanctions on Russia, and diplomatic backing. Again, we made it a huge deal that Russia wanted to annex Crimea, but it's not that big of a deal. Everything that's happening to the Palestinians, not a problem. It's not a big deal. We don't have to worry about it. Okay. But it also begs the question, why is Trump putting on a show of conflicting with Zelensky? I don't buy any of it. I don't buy that show. I don't trust any of them. That's just me. I do think it's a show. Okay. Okay. So one thing I forgot to tell you guys real quick when I was talking about Italy, Rome, the Romans, and the merging of the Goths. So I'm going to insert it right here just before we get to this last little part. After Jesus's death, okay, there were two major sinners vying for control of Christianity. And also this is the time. This is all the timeline, okay? Rome and Kemet were vying for control of the narrative of Christianity, okay? Kemet had the deep theological traditions, but Rome ultimately consolidated power with the Goths through political maneuvering, doctrine enforcement, and military backing. The Goths. The Goths, who were originally at that time Arian Christians, merged with Rome and played a significant role in this struggle. Eventually, Catholicism, aka the Roman Empire, right, merged with the Goths and strengthens Rome's hold on European religious life. That is the Orthodoxy. So I forgot it was in that pile. So that's when I talk about Italy. That is the Goths as well. Roman Catholicism, that is the Goths as well. Okay, so Leon says it's all Germania, a whole bunch of queens and kings that are brothers and sisters beefing nonstop, aka that Chevy SNS. Adrian says denazify, shout out to the Azov battalion. And Leon says 45 degrees. Okay, so at the end of the day, hopefully you all were following what I was putting down. There are specific people that sort of showed up around the turn of the millennia, settled in these particular places and created all these empires and set about for global domination, enslavement, capture, wiping people out, genocide, all this kind of stuff. And we can name the areas where these empires started and what is going on to this day under these people. Okay. At the end of the day, we have to have the bigger picture of the geopolitical sphere to know how we got here and what's going on. There are forces at play today that are part of this hidden history. So, that's my channel. I'm lifting the veil and letting the light in. So to kind of double down on it, to prove that the underplay is still here today and it's the same people, let's talk about the 10 most racist countries in the world and tell me if you don't hear all of these places in Goth history. So here's the little bonus, okay? In Germany, a 2023 survey highlighted that 77% of Black people in Germany reported experiencing racial discrimination. Austria is by Germany. The same 2023 survey indicated that 61% of Black individuals in Austria face racial discrimination. Finland, by Scandinavia, where they supposedly came from, reports have shown that 59% of Black respondents in Finland experienced discrimination based on their race or ethnicity. France, a survey conducted by the Representative Council of France's Black Associations in 2023 revealed that 91% of Black people in metropolitan France reported experiencing racial discrimination. The United States, big shocker, approximately 8 out of 10 African Americans have reported personal experiences of discrimination due to their race or ethnicity. The United Kingdom, a University of Cambridge survey in 2023 found that 88% of Black individuals in Britain reported racial discrimination at work. Even in Italy, a 2016 Pew Research poll indicated that 82% of Italians hold unfavorable views towards Romanis. Oh, there they come again, reflecting the broader racial biases. And in Spain, the same 2016 Pew Research poll showed that 49% of Spaniards hold unfavorable views towards those same Romani people, indicating their racial bias. Isn't that interesting? So hopefully you got the big picture of who the Goths are. Next week, we will talk about the Brittonic people who are not tied to the Goths, victims of the Goths. So we will talk about those, which will help us to talk a little bit more about those the Germanic settlements of the Goths. Coming up this Wednesday on Pivot Point Wednesday, we're continuing with J.J. Hertog's book, The Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch. We are going to go over the key called the Lion's Son. So that's going to be awesome. So if you can't make it this Wednesday, I hope I see you next Sunday. Remember, I love you, I miss you, and you're my favorite. Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And don't forget to check out some of the wilder Pivot Point Wednesday shows. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not so teric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. By subscribing, you'll join a community that thrives on curiosity and growth, and you'll never miss out on insights and some wild discussions. Let's uncover the universe together. Bye.